The sponsor of this episode is Chadwell Supply, an OG in the multifamily industry. Chadwell Supply is the largest privately owned maintenance and repair supplier, and they deliver orders the next day from local warehouses across the United States. To find out how Chadwell Supply will make your day better, visit www.chadwellsupply.com/difference.
Well, welcome everybody. We're here on the Reba Real Estate Business Analytics booth at NAA 2024 here in the city of brotherly love in Philadelphia. And I'm here with Mike Brewer and Paul Marks, familiar faces. And we're talking a bit about what we're seeing around the show. So shall I start?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So centralization, big buzz topic at the moment. Few sessions about it yesterday. I think the thing that I found the most interesting so far was the session that was about how companies are changing their the way that they manage their teams overall, like from a corporate perspective. It's just a very interesting idea. I hadn't heard about this for a while. I remember a few years ago reading a book about the concept of the career lattice. So rather than the ladder that you essentially go up in one direction, you have something that's more like a sort of matrix where you can go sort of laterally and find other ways like to advance. The context where I heard that before was in consulting. It was like Deloitte that introduced that as a way of doing career management. But I saw it again yesterday at a session, and people are talking about it now as, you know, if you're in the property management track, right, you're going from property manager to region to area director to regional to VP of ops. Like, you've now got these options where I can go into central leasing or central accounting, and from central functions I can find my way back into the operations track. I found that really interesting.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of impact and it's things. I think one of the things that people are potentially not thinking about is the impact of centralization, which is a word I don't really like, and we can talk about that later, but is the impact that it will have on the traditional hierarchy of business, which I think is what you're suggesting. And I think that I saw a session yesterday where they were talking about how they completely outsourced or offshored the accounting function of their business, right? Completely wiped out of their company. I think probably aside from maybe a controller or a treasurer in the organization, right? But the rest of the infrastructure completely gone. And I don't think that people are talking about that enough. We're talking about site level centralization where it's impacting leasing, maintenance, and administration, but we're not talking about the complete wiping of the corporate culture, right? Or the complete redesign of the corporate culture. So I think that's something that was really pronounced to me yesterday, and will become more pronounced as we see this year and next year, and the next iterations of centralization and AI.
Have any of your guests been talking about this lately?
And the one thing that I've heard is that we're starting to realize that centralization, one size does not fit all. That every company has a different, and when it gets to a point where you say you don't like that word, a word that I like, specialization.
Yeah.
And so to me, that kind of gives it a different spin than centralization. So that's what I've been.
Yeah, and I think like that lattice, to go back to that thing that they were showing, it's really, I actually took a snap and I think I'll publish it on my website. I was interested enough in what they were saying about it. Essentially, what you've got is a load of specialization, like a load of opportunities to specialize. So, you know, the thing that Mike's talking about, you know, with admin coming off site, that makes a lot of sense because it was never that good of an idea to do that work on site in the first place, right? And most people don't like it.
That's right.
But there are some people that do like it, and you should promote them into positions where they can do more of that, like specialization. And it seems like people are now taking a sort of portfolio view of what are we looking for in our employees? How do we advance them in their career? You know, how do we determine what we want them to focus on? It was really interesting to see the whole thing sort of pulled up to the level of what does our sort of workforce look like in this new environment.
Yeah, I think that that point specifically is what the industry is grappling with the most right now, is how do we completely redesign career tracks so that you keep people inspired to come to work every day, motivated to do the work, right? All the while knowing, because they're seeing it out in the world, AI impacting, centralization impacting, and they can't help but forecast what's this going to mean for me in our industry. And I don't think anybody has nailed the answer.
Right.
No one's nailed that answer.
Yeah, no, for sure. So you, you and I have talked about this, I'm sure, on your podcast before, but it was always somewhat surprising. Like you had worked some years ago in an environment where the APM role had gone away, right?
That's
It's kind of surprising that everyone didn't do the same thing. Like after, I mean, how long ago was that?
almost 20 years ago at the company I'll leave unnamed, but yeah, 20 years ago we were talking about centralization. At the time, the technology wasn't there, but centralization meant one assistant manager was doing the assistant work for 3 properties instead of 1, right? That was centralization. What was interesting to me and funny at the time was we were trying to empower people by decentralizing a lot of the decision making. And what's more interesting to me today is that if you look at a strict definition of the word centralization, it is about command and control. Command and control. That's what centralization is. That's why I think organizational design is a better sort of buzzword to use than centralization. Because command and control is in the hands of few, but you want to give and empower the front lines the opportunity to really do good customer service or good team member engagement, right?
Yeah.
It's an interesting topic.
Yeah, no, I think so too. So I think we were at the same session, another centralization session, where you had a sort of small San Francisco-based portfolio of small properties that was by necessity completely centralized. It was then centralized long before it was cool. Right?
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And then you had a sort of medium-sized fee manager, and it really showed why it's just way harder for fee managers to sort of contemplate this compared to owner operators, where they make all of the decisions about what goes on with their properties. You were at that same thing, right?
I was, yeah. That was a very interesting one. Yeah, I think it's, where you have a forcing function called very small buildings where you can't plant people full time, you are obligated to do centralization, right? Versus the other company that we mentioned where they're big and they have internal infrastructures, they have shared services, so they can use those shared services to leverage their execution, right? You can't do that in a small company.
Yeah. And have you spoken to fee managers about this thing?
Yeah, they're having a hard time. They don't see ultimately there may be some secret sauce to come up with, but it's been instructive.
So in fact, the next sort of project I'm going to be doing a lot of work on is specifically this area, right? So I think the biggest opportunity is fee management, right? Because one of the things I talk about a lot is over the last decade, the industry has just become way more fee managed than it used to be. That's right. You've seen something like a 60% increase in the size of management portfolios and about a 17% decrease in the size of ownership. So basically what happened in the last decade, where most of the time it was cheap to borrow money, right? Loads of smaller companies came into the market. It's a way more diverse industry than it was, but they're not all trying to build management platforms, right? So you've got both. The average property is on average not only more likely to be fee managed, but more likely to be fee managed by a really big fee manager. And they keep getting bigger and bigger, right? These guys. But the thing that one of the things that's always struck me as weird about that model is even though those companies get really big, you don't really have economies of scale, right? If I've got 100,000 units, it still costs me the same to start a property because it's all bill back, charge back to the owner. So it costs exactly the same to run a property. I can get better deals on paint, equipment, and that kind of thing. It's the fundamentals of what drives the cost of the industry don't really change much with scale. And the thing that I noticed, I started to notice in 2023 was that there are some fee managers that have started to offer like menus of centralized services. So, all right, you can have 2 FTEs at this property, and you can buy from us basically the services that your assistant property manager have done on a per unit per month basis. I think that's a really, really interesting model, and I kind of don't see how that doesn't eventually become a really common way that companies do it. And that then unlocks this potential to have scale, economies of scale in the business.
Yeah, you know what I think is baked into everything that you just said, and no one wants to really admit is this will impact that FTE number that you talked about, full-time employee, just for the audience. Yeah, full-time employee, it will impact headcount.
Right.
You can suggest that we're going to recreate all these jobs, we're going to create all this other stuff. Yes, for now, but eventually BI is going to inform our centralization or organizational redesign, and AI is going to completely automate big portions of what we do today. And it's ultimately going to lead to a reduction in headcount, which happens to be one of the biggest line items in terms of cost in your P&L, right? Right behind taxes and other things. So we can't, in my head, I would encourage everybody not to pretend that this is not going to impact people in a devastating way. It will, maybe not today, but it will tomorrow. But I think to your point, that's where that economy of scale being very, very big, because they can move faster, they can put more resources into further automating our industry. That's where you're really going to see some reduction in P&L costs through the talent side.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, one of the reasons why I've heard from some managers that they're having a hard time is that they've developed a tech stack on different technologies.
That's a good
And then
point.
they take on a new client that prefers a different tech stack.
Yeah,
So
that's
they've lost that economy of skill to be able to offer what they've invested their time and effort and money.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I hadn't thought about it until you mentioned this, but there are many different financial services products that rent collection, payments, deposit alternatives, insurance, like all of these different admin related like products that people buy. Like the vendors know to go to the owner to sell the product, and if you're the third party manager, you've got to figure out how to support all these different technologies. So they sort of play whack-a-mole with technology. If you move to a model where it's more often the case that the admin is being done, it's not some person in the property doing this admin with these apps. It's more like, I'm going to pay you, fee manager, to do this scope of work for me. Like that concentrates. That should give fee managers more control over how they run stuff. One of the things I'm really into this idea right now. One of the things I like about this model is it fundamentally feels more accountable.
yes.
Like, so again, if you think about the thing that smaller owners in particular, like the thing that they complain about the most with third-party management is it's very sensitive to who you hire. I mean, you know this, having worked on growing a fee management portfolio lately, right? It's whoever that person is you hire into that property, like you really sink or swim based on that. Well, again, a better solution, it feels like to me, is I'm going to purchase a service. We're going to agree a price for you to deliver these services to me, and we're going to have SLAs like between us. And now, third-party manager, it's up to you to deliver this, and you have to meet these standards. You've got away from that problem that everything sinks or swims on whoever that person is you have to hire. So I think it's great. I think that's better.
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying that, it comes to mind to me like, I don't know why landscaping came to mind for me, but landscapers are just an extension of our team members. They're removed from us, right? And we can set standards and expectations as it relates to the service that they're providing to us, and we can hold them very accountable to them. And it's very akin to what you're suggesting, right? You sort of segment these different functions or workflows in an organization. All of a sudden, I'm just buying that from you, right? And now, because you're a third party, I can hold you more accountable. By the way, because I'm a service, I'm probably staffing up my resource to make sure that I can deliver on the promise, right? To make the fee, because I don't want to lose your business.
Right.
So yeah, it's fascinating what's happening in the company, and I don't think anybody has a real clear understanding of what that's ultimately going to look like.
Right.
But it's just going to be farming a lot of what we do today out to the third-party sources, or even offshoring some of that work to organizations that they're not, stateside.
Yeah, and it's all of that stuff is going to get more and more automated. It's centralized, right? That feels like certainly with admin, it feels like the path that we're on. It might start to move quite quickly.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the accelerating pace of this stuff is like off the charts.
Yeah.
No longer can you think about, things evolved over hundreds of years, right? You think about cars and televisions and things of that nature, evolved over a lot of years. But now, because technology moves so quickly, you can only look at like the last trailing 30 days worth of pace to extrapolate the future, right? And the last 30 days or 6 months of pace have been off the charts. So can you imagine what the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months are going to be predicated on this?
Yeah. No, it's true.
It's going to be mind-blowing.
It's true. So Mike just touched on maintenance, which I think is its whole. It's a whole thing. Like centralized maintenance, it's very different from centralizing anything else.
True.
You have a lot of maintenance facilities people on your show. Have you talked much about? We were listening to a panel yesterday about it, but have you talked much about maintenance centralization on your show?
Say over and over some of them. And there are some people who have been successful doing it because they have that concentration, they have that cluster. But the ones that don't can't figure out what the secret sauce to do it.
So it's interesting. I've been talking to a lot of maintenance vendors at this show, and I mean it's a real killer if you're even if you're a 30-minute drive from one property to another. That's at least one job that you didn't get done. So it's really difficult to sort of pull resources kind of unless you have to. In fact, most of the companies that have done that thing of clustering stuff have more in common with the company that we were hearing from yesterday, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have a bunch of sub 100 unit properties where you have to figure out a different solution to maintenance. So yeah, how you organize it is different. I've long believed. I mean, really since I did the research for this year's white paper, when you talk about centralizing front office staff, you are talking about breaking the 1 to 100 ratio. Like it's about figuring out how to deliver a better service with fewer people, right? That's fundamentally what it's about. Maintenance, I just don't think that's what the money is. Because at the end of the day, somebody's going to come fix the fridge.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you can self-serve some elements of it, but not that much, right? And there's some really good solutions out there. Happy Thoughts, for example. I love the idea of trying to triage maintenance with a virtual team. So that takes pressure off some of the really sucky parts of the job, like the on-call part of the job, stuff like that is great. If you're fundamentally trying to change anything about how you run these properties, you need you're not doing so to cut the number of staff. You're doing so to stop wasting money on stuff that you don't need to, right? So if I instead of having 5 different properties with 3 generalists in each property, I now have a regional head of maintenance who's running a pool of 15 people. Well, now I've got some options, right? I can make, if I'm doing a lot of HVAC work, I can just have an HVAC specialist, and right. And the thing that people tell you is where you really end up saving the money by like if you have an application specialist, appliance specialist, you stop paying invoices to external companies to fix appliances. So it's sort of unglamorous, sort of $500 at a time, like savings, but they mount up, and that seems to be more where the benefit is in maintenance centralization than the stuff that we talk about in front of us.
I think it's going to get really interesting. I think in the near term, it's going to be a hybrid of things. It's going to be the triage, like you talked about with Happy Care. It's going to be some outsourcing efforts using companies like Lesson, right, who have curated a bunch of maintenance labor. And then your on-site team, which I do think will reduce in headcount, but they will be focused primarily on customer service and very quick win type stuff. So if something is of an emergent nature in an apartment, that on-site team or even that centralized area focused team is going to be there to do that quick stuff, right? But then you're going to farm most of the other stuff out to a Lesson who's really beefed up their effort, right, in whatever market you're in. And then the other thing is the triage piece. You're going to take the administration or the direction. And then I think when AI sort of infiltrates all of this, even that windshield time that we're talking about, the AI is going to help us determine which technician is closest to the issue, has the inventory on board, and has the skill set to actually fix the issue. And so it's going to be a blend of all these things that's going to be able to help you drive centralization and thus the reduction of costs.
All you have to do is look at one market segment. That's the single family rental.
That's right.
Market segment.
That's right.
See
That is right.
Yeah.
Which is they have windshield time, they have trucks on the road, they have to make those investments.
That's right.
And that's the only way they can make
Exactly right.
Yeah, no, it's true. And one of the really important differences with multifamily is that because you've got this lump of labor, right? You've got these three people that are at this property and they can more or less deal with the work orders. Mm-hmm. So, you've got to, that removes the incentive that you have in single family. Single family, every time a work order comes in, you've got to decide who's going to do it.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And how much it's cost and when, how important is it. So you have to do that stuff in multifamily, right? You've just got a team that will more or less manage it. So you've got to sort of overcome this this inertia of getting people to. So here's another thing. Like so thinking, putting your sort of operations hat on. I think one of the other things I was talking to a vendor about this yesterday. I think operational leaders tend to be just generally a bit scared of maintenance, right? Because operational leaders come from more of a white collar background. It's a blue collar thing that they're tinkering with. The risks of things going wrong are there's loads of stuff that I don't know how to do that could potentially go wrong. So I think it just means that operational leaders tend to just be leery about it generally.
Yeah.
But was that true of you?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I would say yes to a degree. I actually grew up in this business on the service side first and foremost, right? So I did do a lot of that work that we're talking about myself. So the advantage that gave me is when I'm standing in a room with a service technician or a supervisor, I can talk about discussions and different things, right, that they deal with every day or put their hands on because I put my hands on those same things. So I can gain a little bit of perspective and empathy, right? Which I think is the key word here for operators is, look, service team members are the most under-celebrated people in this industry. You look around the NAA attendance today, or the fact that we don't have maintenance mania this year, no dig on NAA, but our team members that are on the front lines really providing the efforts that lead to renewals, right, yes, are not celebrated in our industry. So we need to exercise a lot more empathy. We need to figure out how to celebrate them more, right? So that, to your point, when I'm afraid to kind of direct you or do things with you, I'm not anymore. Yeah, because I'm celebrating you and you appreciate me for doing so.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I wrote a piece last week about so I have now this quite strong view that anyone who succeeds in centralizing any part of their maintenance, doing any of the organizational redesign, always starts by sorting their data out.
Yeah,
that's what the problem is. So we tend to look for multifamily. Just has this habit of looking for widgets to make stuff easier or whatever. But the people that move the needle are, it's the stories when we wanted to reduce turn times. We figured out that our data was all screwed up. We had to get maintenance techs to start following a consistent procedure for how they dealt with work orders. The way that they solved it was they brought asset management and maintenance people together. And when the maintenance teams are part of the process, right, and they understand the intent of what they're being asked to do, then really good things happen. But you've got to you're so dependent on the data, and the data is so dependent on the people that are performing the service, that you have to make the people central to what it is that you're changing. Because otherwise, there's no data, and no data, no progress.
Yeah,
I think one of the things that nobody questions is the fact that what the importance of good maintenance plays on renewals.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Yes.
that people are looking for ways, because it's very difficult to find and retain good maintenance people.
That's right.
So what people are trying to do is find ways to incentivize to what some of these programs do, incentivize their maintenance and try and retain them, educate them, get them to be more excited about searching for solutions. Whether it's centralization or the lessons, whatever it is, It's something in progress. Watch.
Yeah, it's a super important point, and it's a point that people don't understand well enough either. It's again from a data perspective, it's quite hard to understand the relationship between maintenance and renewal, right? Because renewal is very sort of multifactorial. But we also don't know as much as we should about, when a work order is closed. Is that really resolved, that issue? Like, did the is the resident happy that this thing was resolved, or did the person like track mud through their rug, or leave the blinds open so their dog was too hot during the day, or like there's a couple of very interesting AI chat-based companies around at the moment uh, who are having a complete conversation, sort of before, during, after conversation about how the resident feels about the the maintenance experience that they had, and they're starting to be able to understand sentiment. Yeah. So if you can understand sentiment well, and you can tie together good maintenance numbers, good sentiment, higher renewals, then you've got the sort of smoking gun that we probably don't have right now.
Yeah, I think that's right.
All right, so let's talk about a couple of other things. So you can't miss around the trade show floor like fraud. Right now, there are more and bigger like vendors of this technology than anything else. Like I wrote about it in 2020. I just released a series of interviews about it. I was really trying to get to the bottom of it. You're obviously, we're an Atlanta-based company, conventionally like quite the hotbed for fraudulent activity, but I guess more recently it was coupled with taking a really, really long time to evict people, so the consequences got more serious. How have you been thinking about this?
I actually don't stop thinking about this for sure. Atlanta leads the league in, I think, fraudulent activity as it relates to fake IDs or fake income stubs, all the stuff, right? And I don't know what is really hard for an operator is the second you think you have it figured out, right? The technology is in place to actually catch people on the front side. The bad actors are getting just a little bit more ahead because the technology that we use to catch them is evolving as well, right? Or their technology to compete against us is evolving as well. So I don't know. It's interesting. I had a conversation that's somewhat related to this. The difference between like taking someone's income ratio, like income to rent ratio, versus just taking their credit score, and that being a better testament to their behavior or behavior as it relates to paying rent, as opposed to the ratio that we used to use. That's it's a fairly new concept, I think. So I've been thinking a lot about that.
Yeah, and it's so one of the things that's interesting is that it's getting harder and harder to understand people's income stability.
That's right.
So because I guess particularly in Gen Z, there's way more non-W2 income that people have. So the conventional ways of understanding whether or not somebody can afford this apartment, it's just a much harder thing to put together. I mean, I guess that the fact that there are things like Flex and Best Egg, like the fact that you have these flexible rent products out there that are tailored for, I can pay the rent, I just might not be able to pay it first day of the month, like they're solving that problem.
That's right.
Tells you that the nature of lots of people's income, there's more gig work out there, there's more different sources of income. And there are companies, sort of de novo, like companies out there whose thing is, we pull bank records of people and we basically figure out what their income stability is. That's a new thing, I guess, in the industry, which I think is super interesting.
Now, interestingly enough, I had a guest on too long ago who really opened my eyes to something. His name was Mike Brewer. And he told the story that just blew me away about where employees at a property were involved in helping. Mind kind of telling that?
Yeah, and this definitely didn't happen to us directly. I just read about it in a magazine, and it happened to be in Atlanta, where bad actors actually made application to go to work for property management companies, and they would facilitate the fraud internally. Right? So all the best technology on the front side was completely negated because the employee was circumventing the process and the workflow, right? I think the solution in the future has to be people less.
Yeah.
No one touches anything related to the application and the lease signing, right?
Yeah.
You have to let the technology do that and get the human out of there completely. Because humans by nature, well, bad humans by nature, we're going to try to figure out how to game the system.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
Just to add one more thing to that, sorry, there's another punchline. A lot of those bad actors on the inside, they were running a racket where they would literally steal appliances in the middle. Like they would move in, take occupancy, and then like completely clean out the
Wow. Yeah. No. So it's interesting talking to these different vendors. You can tell they have different philosophies, right? There are companies that are more orientated towards I want to understand your financial stability, and companies that are more orientated towards I want to understand if you're trying to fake this application, right? And it's a sort of subtle but quite important difference, right? Because the ones who are more on the we want a humanless process. We want this to just bring them to our window. We'll take care of the whole thing. We want to offer really nice service. We're going to have a chatbot that steps you through the process and makes it nice and easy. And it's like we're trying to qualify people into the property. We're not just trying to stop fraud. We're trying to figure out whether or not you can afford it. Because if you're focused on fraud, you're going to get like false positives, right? And you're going to turn away good people just because it's hard to figure out how much money they make, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting area. All right, have we got time for one more? One more, okay, because we're on the Reba booth, and so it would be remiss of us not to talk about one of the other panels that took place yesterday. So Reba was talking about something that's been that they've been doing for a while, amenity auditing, which sounds like a super unglamorous thing, until you just sort of realise that by just going through and auditing whether the amenities are set up correctly, you just release a load of free money. And the interesting thing was, so Paul, our friend Paul Bergeron, was at the session, and he starts this question like, "Oh, why is this data so bad?" And the thing is, there's a really good answer to that question. It's really hard for that data not to be bad, right? If you think about leases are things you only revisit once a year, right? So there's no reason to look at a lease between the time someone moves in and the next person moves in. You have to. There's a lot of different things you have to do on a lease. There's everything is negotiable, right? So if you made a change to some amenity because it helped you to close this lease, which is a perfectly legitimate thing to do, that means somebody's got to remember that.
Yeah.
And what happens over time is you just have all these mistakes that it's perfectly legitimate how they got into your software, but if you don't audit them, you just don't make as much money as you would otherwise.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think what was interesting. One of the things that was interesting in that session, it's just a little nuanced piece, is the idea that Donald said, you don't even have to go to the property because there are satellite images today that can actually tell you that corner unit now has trees growing up, so you no longer have the view anymore. That wasn't his exact point, but I'm making up a piece of that. But the point still remains, right? And so I think the ability to get out there and do amenity auditing today is a little bit easier than it was in the past. We had to physically walk the property. But I also think that what's interesting to me about that, I don't know that they talked about this yesterday, is mapping technology that's happening today. So we're mapping the interior space of every building that is built on this planet, right? And new buildings are mapping automatically. And so in the future, our amenity auditings, I think, are going to be largely automated because you have this mapping technology that keeps physical space right in a database.
Yeah.
And the auditing is going to become a kind of an automated process so that, again, the humans cut out of the equation and you optimize on goals.
Yeah, that's we won't go down this rabbit hole, but the next white paper I'm going to be publishing is with Ingrain, right? And it's about how many different applications are using the same map to do something that adds value to either the performance or the resident experience in a building. So anyway, I could go crazy on that, but I'm not going to. Guys, this has been fun. Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll be catching up on one or other of our podcasts before too long. But everyone enjoy the show.
Thank you.
Thank you again to Chadwell Supply for sponsoring this episode. Chadwell Supply delivers unforgettable service with next day delivery, online and in-person maintenance training, procurement platform assistance to make your ordering simple. Visit chadwellsupply.com/difference to learn how Chadwell Supply will make your day better.